All right. Well, on today's episode of the Strong Serve, we have a very special guest. He's been in the game for a long time, Rich Kendrick. He's a post-injury strength coach. I think he's going to add a lot of value to you guys, whoever's listening. And this is the Strong Serve podcast where we're here to serve you. We're here for improving your wellness, your body resilience, giving you more information about being an active human being. And it's for pickleball addicts, pickleball friends, pickleball family, anybody that is around the pickleball game. This is to help you. Okay? So without further ado, Rich, how you doing?
Hey, Roberto, how are you? Thank you for the intro. I appreciate that.
Good. No problem, no problem. I resonated so much in our conversations, and you're just ready to give a lot of wisdom. I can tell you're full of stories, and so I'm
I
so excited
am.
to talk to you. By the way, I'm your host, Roberto Molina. I'm a physical therapist by trade. I'm also a geriatric specialist, physical therapy specialist, and right now I am serving the pickleball community. And so, first, I want to ask you who you are and who do you serve?
Sure. So I am Rich Kendrick. I went to Plymouth State University in New Hampshire, and I was going to be a meteorologist. And I looked at the curriculum, and I was like, "Do you have anything else?" And she's like, the guidance counselor says, "Well, what do you like?" I said, "Well, I'm a pretty decent athlete." She's like, "Well, we have a great physical education department, and you'll love it." And I fell in love with it, and I've just never looked back, and that's 28 years later.
Man, almost 3 decades. So from
Yeah,
meteorology, the weather to
yeah,
being an injury strength coach, and just working with people's bodies, man. That's an interesting move. That's awesome, man.
yeah.
Um,
So for my first 10 years, I was very in the corporate setting. So button down shirt, slacks, shine shoes. My hair was done. I was clean shaven, and it was push pull squat, help you lose 20 pounds, pump you full of supplements. But then people were going out and they were recreating in different sports variations, and they would get hurt. And so that right at 10 years, so right around 10 years into my career, I hurt my own shoulder, and I went down the physical therapy road, and I started to realize that my own skeletal system was flawed per se. And I really dove deep into rolfing and understanding fascia and the skeletal system, and the fact that I've been sitting for almost 20 years at that point. You know, you
mhm.
start at 6 years old, through high school, 18, into college. So 23, 24 years old is I was sitting the whole time. And so I started to really understand structure, that for the past 17 years, 18 years now, that we have to look at the structure first, and then we look at muscle. Hopefully
Mm.
that makes sense. Looking at tendons and ligaments and joints and ranges of motion first when we assess our clients, and
Mhm.
then we really talk about muscle.
That's
So
awesome.
that's kind of where I became that post-injury strength coach. It's kind of, when they're done with you, Roberto, 99% of people don't know what to do once coming out of physical therapy, because they hear the words, "You're okay now." You're okay in the sense of the physical therapy is done for that injury. And I do that is because it's not your job to look at the rest. Your job is this, whatever injury they're in there for. You're not there to fix everything else. And that's
Mhm.
kind of where I really stepped in for the last 18 years.
That's awesome. That's something that, I really think about when, my patients leave the clinic, what are they going to do when they go home? You know what I mean? That's sort of kind of what I'm also trying to do with my social media and working with pickleball players, also trying to reach them outside of the clinic. There's a whole world out there, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
appreciate a lot of what you're doing, and it sounds like you definitely know the human body really well. So how did that influence you starting your business?
So right around that time, I got out of the corporate gym. So a corporate gym's like your LA Fitnesses and your 24. So that's when they really started to pop up, right? There was a huge boom in that. It was kind of when the WOD started becoming popular with CrossFit. So at that point, I went off. I started working in small studios, and that's when I became self-employed. And I stumbled into a studio with a Rolfer his name's Gary Nixon. He's in Seattle. Shout out.
Yep.
And
Shout out.
he just got out of it's called Soma. It's very similar to Rolfing. He just got out of Soma school. So we kind of joined forces, and he was working on me, and I was working with him on him, and we just honing our skills, and we're still friends to this day, so it's great.
A lot of you guys don't know that Rich is actually living in Hood River, Oregon.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it sounds like a pretty neat town. There's a lot of windsurfing there if you want to check it out.
Yeah.
But you can find Rich there in Hood River, Oregon. So why Hood River, Oregon?
Seattle was grown. So I have 3 kids, the 12, 10, and 6. And when the girls, so we've been here for 7 years. So the girls were 5 and 3 essentially, and my wife would go to work. We did maternity leave. She went back to work. She was pumping in the bathroom at lunch. I would come get the milk. I'd go pick up the girls around 3 o'clock. Bree, my wife, would come home around 6 and cry because she was at work every day. And, but it was an hour to get to work to drive 10 miles, an hour to get home to drive 10 miles. We lived in West Seattle. We both worked in Salt Lake Union. And it's not that far of a distance, but the traffic was so bad because the city was growing 40,000 people a year for the last 10 years, a little longer, like not even Microsoft, like Amazon and Google and Alibaba, all these large tech companies were coming into the city, and the city wasn't designed to grow at a mass scale. So someone had the brilliant idea of putting a coliseum on over the highway bottleneck.
Jeez.
And my brother-in-law moved down to Hood River to kind of get away from a toxic relationship, and we would come and visit, and we would go down to the water where all the kiters and the windsurfers launch from. And I was looking around, and I'm looking at all the generations. I'm like, oh my God, I could totally make it in a town like this. And that's pretty much how I ended up here. So we moved here when I was 40, and I didn't know anybody except my brother-in-law, and I'm also a fascial stretch therapist. So I brought my table down to the water where they all would launch, and I'm like, hey man, let me stretch you out. And I did that. We moved in June, and I did that all summer. And I was picking up clients, and I still have a bunch of pro kiters. But I'm 40 years old. Yeah, I just turned 40. I'm on top of a ladder, an 8-foot ladder. It's snowing. I'm up in a lot of cherries and a lot of fruit. There's a Fruit Loop here. So the Northwest is the apple capital of the world.
Wow.
So they grow a lot of apples and pears and so on and so forth. So I'm like trimming trees, 40 years old. I'm like, what happened to my life? Because I went from Seattle, which has, 4 million people, to a town that has 7,500. In Seattle, you can run a Groupon and you can have 30 people in a month.
Definitely.
It's easy, right? But here it's all relationships. So, yeah.
So it kind of sounds, did you always plan on being a business owner, or it just kind of fell on your lap?
No, my mom is still an entrepreneur, and it's just in my blood. I got tired of giving the gym half of my income.
Yeah.
And they would, in the gym world, you go to the gym and they say, hey, it's a 50-50 split, and you can use all our equipment, and you could build your business with all the people that walk in the door. So you're
Mhm.
constantly having to learn how to talk to people that are trying to work out. You know,
Mhm.
they could smell you coming, and you get really good at selling your service.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, it was all I'm doing is nitpicking your lack of understanding of biomechanics.
Yeah.
You know, I would say, Roberto, you gotta move your knee in your squat because it's tracking wrong or whatever, right? You
Yeah.
gotta.
Yeah. Been
But
there.
you also can't talk in your scientific terms that you learned in college because the person that didn't study physiology or kinesiology in college has no idea what you're talking about.
They're not gonna understand you.
You have to learn how to talk in layman's terms, but also talk in the way that you do know what you're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
it's very interesting. It's such an interesting industry, and I've tried to get out multiple times.
They just keep bringing you back in, right?
I've been.
You know, so from talking to Rich before, he's worked with John Davies, Renegade Training, Keegan Smith, Paul Chek. He's done a lot of stuff. Is there any particular technique or I know you mentioned earlier the fascial stretching. Anything
Sure.
that you would say is like your favorite or something that you really think kind of elevated your game?
Yeah, I have to give a lot of credit in the last 3 years for the knees over toes guy.
Okay.
Have you heard about that?
Yes, yes. Very popular on Instagram and on the
Yeah,
internet.
I mean, that changed the game. And mind you, it's not new information.
Hmm.
It was just the way that ATG put the information together. They simplified it and they really targeted the lower limb,
Yeah.
which for 20 years, John Davies always talked about it. The
Hmm.
secret's in the big toe, right? So you've heard that ballet has been talking about that since, what is his name? Joseph Pilates or whatever his name is.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, for decades they've talked about it. But to simplify it to the point of tib raise, straight-legged calf raise is your gastroc,
Yep.
bent knee calf raise is the soleus, loosening up the plantar and being able to squat over your knees, which is the outliers have always talked about that.
Yeah.
But in the certification world for the last in my career, 25, almost 30 years, your knees never go over your toes. But then
Yep.
you're watching all these people, what's his name? Tom Platt. Tom Platt in
Hmm.
the 80s, they used to call him Quadzilla. He would never win bodybuilding competitions because his legs were too big. Symmetrical, he was out of balance because his legs were so big.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy would squat 500 pounds and do reps of 25.
Wow.
You know,
Yeah.
but butt to ankles, knees over the toes, but he's in his 60s now, and he still does classes on how to squat properly, and he still squats way more than most people, way more than I do. I mean, it's like triple body weight, double body weight, or something like that. 325, and he's in his 60s. So there's
Yeah.
something to be said about knees over toes,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it creates the spring that we need to be resilient.
Hmm.
And I was kind of thinking about, what are some things and ideas that I can help people really understand and realize is I think the secrets are in the tendon, not the muscle.
Oh, okay.
And why I
Wow.
say that is because the tendon creates more force output than the muscle. And the tear point when someone gets hurt isn't necessarily the muscle. It isn't necessarily the tendon. It's the connection. So if we look at the Achilles, it's really
Hmm.
where the Achilles tendon connects to the calf, the gastroc.
Hmm.
In that line, that's where the tear occurs. Most
Yeah.
men, I mean, you can argue it all you want, but it's the connection.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
because in the past 30 years, outside of just inside the mainstream, it was always
Mm-hmm.
about muscle.
Mm-hmm.
Muscles, bigger muscles. Nautilus came onto the scene in the late 70s, early 80s. So you're stuck in
Mm-hmm.
these fixed positions, and you can put a lot of mass on, but if you put it like for pickleball, if you put that person on a court that
Mm-hmm.
have moved in a lateral movement pattern, they're only in a
Wow.
linear pattern. They ride their bike, they lift the weights on the machines, they do step up classes and aerobic classes,
Yeah.
no lateral movement. There's the issue.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, great point. I have a friend who played a weekend of pickleball, Saturday, Sunday, 6 hours, and he tore his Achilles. He came from, taking care of his little baby girl, but there was no lateral movement practice anywhere. He just came from, sitting for long hours for work. He's a psychologist, and
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about. He, boom, snapped his Achilles, and it's terrible. It's terrible. And also, so I want to go back to something you just mentioned about the knees over toes guy. Wow, he simplified that whole
Yeah.
concept. You know, I think so much about, in PT school, you weren't supposed to, they didn't teach us to put the knees over the toes. I was like, it was wrong, right, to squat like that.
Yep.
And now we learned actually it's not wrong to bring your knees over your toes. It's actually can be really good for you, I actually even my in my programming, I give people the quote unquote 60 squats to get their
Yep.
knees over the toes, and I teach them to lunge getting their knees over the toes because I realize that they need stability over greater ranges of motion, and that's
Yeah.
going to help with playing pickleball or really anything you do that involves your legs. So that was yeah.
It's the elongation of the patella tendon, which is vital. And then it's looking at the synovial fluid within the joint.
Hmm.
The cushion of the meniscus needs to be replenished. So now you're just talking, it's just basic blood flow.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
and I've always had really good range of motion. I've never ignored it in my career. And I'm 47. So 43, 44, I would feel the stairs going down the stairs in the morning. And I accepted it, but I can loosen up that my knees didn't hurt me, but I felt it in the morning. And then so what I do, and I read,
What I would do.
yeah, what I do is I'll buy your program and I'll do it and I'll reverse engineer it and I'll take out and this is the evolution of strength training. And this is what all the greatest coaches do is they go out and they seek information from someone else that they think not necessarily knows more or anything like that. It's just they
Hmm.
put it into a unique order of importance in a program. And I would take that information and I'm like, oh, I like this. I don't like this. I like this. I would do this instead. Right. And there's the evolution. You can see it across the board in all modalities. You can see it in manual body work is,
Hmm.
like Gary, he has a soma, massage therapy background as a
Hmm.
foundation. And then he's also a fascial stretch therapist and he's like the highest level. But he's going out and he's learning all these other manual modalities, and then you mold it all together, and then something else is created.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's the beauty of the fitness world, the industry as a whole,
Hmm.
and it's the evolution of human body essentially. And
Yeah.
where it was weird and bizarre, like to be really flexible, like an acrobat or like a Circus Olay.
Yeah.
Now you could see that the fitness world is trying to get to that point.
Definitely. I can see that. Yep. I
You
agree
know,
100%. Yeah.
and then putting muscle onto a structure like that, that's athleticism. That's like ninja-like movement skills, you
Perfect.
know?
Yeah.
And to elaborate a little bit more about what I do is when people come to me, I don't look at age, right?
Hmm.
I look at and I listen to the injuries of the past.
Hmm.
I have an ACL tear. Okay, so you're, or Achilles tear. You're in your early 40s. You decided to play pickleball just like your buddy, and
Yeah.
you tore your Achilles. Okay, I understand. Tell me the first severe injury that you've had in your past. When I was 11 years
Mm.
old, broke my
Wow.
ankle. Like, that's where we start, the broken ankle,
Wow.
because that's where it all started. You break the ankle, your body naturally compensates. So if you're in your 40s, when they when you broke your ankle, so you're 11 years 30 years ago, they would just cast it, right? So now I'm dealing with shortened tendons, shortened ligaments, underdeveloped stabilizing muscles in the ankle, right? So there's so much so many issues that are dealt with, and it might not even be the ankle that you tore, the Achilles that you tore. It might be the other ankle, and it's
Hmm.
that natural compensation that the body does brilliantly because it's trying to get away from pain. I mean, it's so beyond the logical thought, but that's where we start. We start there. We work on that ankle, because once you start to open up that ankle, then everything will start to essentially realign itself. It's kind of like that chiropractor that only works on the atlas,
Yeah.
which is really fascinating.
Man, Rich, what a great concept, man. Like, guys, this is what a coach does. He's able to see a holistic view of your whole entire life and your injuries and things like that you've had when you were 10 years old. So what is one or two pieces of advice that you can give our listeners that are listening to this podcast right now if
Sure.
they want to think kind of like an injury coach? You know what I mean? If they want to look at their bodies and kind of see things that they can do better or seek, better advice or just improve themselves.
Sure, sure. One thing I would do is I would walk outside barefooted.
Mm.
And why that is to start to loosen up the foot. So,
Hmm.
in the United States, we all wear shoes that are over padded. They crush the toe box. I mean, sure,
Hmm.
barefooted or minimalistic shoes have been around for a long time, but there's a very small population that wears them because people go to the doctor or my back hurts. Oh, you need orthotics.
Hmm.
But their feet have been crammed in these shoes for, since they've been wearing shoes, and they get bigger arch support, which inhibits the development of the foot, and it locks down the ankle, and then it messes up the whole system.
Right.
So I would
Yeah.
say start to wear minimalistic shoes with big toe boxes, or if you have the ability to walk around barefoot more often
Let's see.
and
Do you have
allow
any
foot to expand.
great advice? Do you think you have any recommendations that you could give our listeners of any minimalist shoe companies that you like?
I wear zeros, so it's Xero. They're out of
Perfect.
Colorado. They're American made. That was important to me. Yeah. I mean, they're a unique looking shoe. I mean, they're not Nike by no means.
Yeah, I've
They
seen
don't,
them. Yeah,
but their performance is great and they last a long. So like, I'm really hard on shoes, and I'll wear them for 8 months and then I get a new pair.
that's awesome.
That's
Yeah,
a long time.
that's a pretty long time for shoes,
Yeah.
definitely. The
Yeah.
way I beat up shoes,
Yeah.
man, that's
They're
that's a
well
pretty long time.
Yeah, they're well built for
Well
sure.
built, perfect, perfect. So I know we talked obviously before the podcast, and I want to pick your brain a little bit about your view on nutrition. I know we talked about,
Okay.
some supplements. Is there anything that you think our audience could benefit from? Any nutritional advice?
So that's a broad one.
I know it's too broad, and I
Yeah,
know nutrition and diet can get a little dicey, but
sure,
I guess in the sense of energy and just, we're talking about the
sure.
tendon, something that can help with tendon,
Okay.
growth or yeah, nutrition.
And this is 28 years. This is my opinion.
Let's
Uh,
go.
Probably it's outside of the norm, but I would say you you don't even have to label it. But if I have to label it for someone to understand what I'm saying, is I would say paleo.
Paleo. Okay.
And all really it is no sugar and no grain. Stay away from no sugar and no grain, and I think you'll be okay,
Okay.
right? And not necessarily, I mean, if females in perimenopause and menopause, this is a different conversation. And you check with your physician, stuff like that.
Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
you uh, meat, high fatty meat, eggs,
Mm-hmm.
very minimal vegetables, more fruit, and water. Obviously, you look at your mineral intake, like we've talked about, is
Mm-hmm.
omega threes from specific companies.
Yeah.
Um, you want a omega-3 that binds with polyphenols that will avoid and stop oxidation. Very important. Fish, chicken, of course. I'm not a fan of pork for parasites and things like that. I avoid that. I think they're a very disgusting animal, but whatever, my opinion. And we want organs. We want to eat the whole animal
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
because of the fat, right? And so then where I wanted it all to go is fasting. Fasting is extremely important, and it's relatively new, but it's not. It's
Mm-hmm.
more mainstream, but it's not. And to me, fasting. I've been fasting for 15 years, and I think fasting is just common sense. If you're constantly and I was raised and I went to college for it, that it was 6 meals a day, your macros, you're counting your macros, you understand your micros, and every meal had protein, carb, and the fat, and that's how my brain works. I could eat chicken and some type of vegetable and rice every day, all day long. And I did that for decades, 2 decades.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm probably a decade and a half. But what's happening is your digestive system's never stopping. So if the digestive system is constantly moving, it has no time to do anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And it's argumentative, but if you can stop eating and fast for, the person needs to play with their own fast. Like I like 18-20. That's my
Mm-hmm.
jam. I do that probably six days a week. It depends on what we're doing on the weekends. But, I stop eating at 7 o'clock at night and I
Yeah.
don't until noon. That's 17
Mm-hmm.
hours. It's really simple, right? I
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
personally like to work. I work out at 11 a.m. I have that ability. I'm the boss, right? And I eat at noon, usually 1 o'clock. That's 18. But what's happening is it allows the body to go into autoplasty, right? Which is
Yeah.
your body's absorption of dead cells,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's just recycling, right? And once a
Mm-hmm.
week, I'm not super consistent, but once a week to every 2 weeks, I do a 24 hour. My super discipline, I just been doing it for so long, it's not a big deal to me
It's a
anymore.
habit now. Yeah.
It's such a habit. And if I do it, great. If I don't, I don't stress about it.
Great. So we heard about fasting, keeping it simple, paleo, staying away from
Yeah.
sugar. Guys, this is 20 years of coaching and looking at the human body
Yeah.
right here talking. So you make your, own opinion, but
Yeah.
this is almost 3 decades of experience here.
You mentioned something about energy.
Yeah.
So once you kind of play with what I'm talking about, and it's self-discovery, honestly. It has to be, because we're all unique. There is no cookie cutter diet that works for everybody. Like we've literally been poisoned since you came out of the womb.
Yeah.
You can argue with me all you want, but look it. The air is poisoned, the water is poisoned, the food is poisoned, all the your clothes, all your furniture, your rugs, your cooking utensils. So you can argue all you want. It's just a fact. So when it comes to that individualization of nutrition, you have to understand yourself.
Wow.
And it's self-discovery. And so you can go get a nutritionist, and I do this too. But it's just cookie cutter.
Yeah.
Like you stick with your ethnicity because you have to understand generational nutrition.
Genetics and yeah.
Your genes and your cells have been accepting certain amounts of food and certain types of food for long periods of time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true.
It's fascinating, and it's because the fitness world isn't really managed. So it has gone so many directions, and it's so bizarre. Well, it's so fascinating. But self-discovery is kind of where I was going to. And then with the fasting, it's training the body to be fat adaptation, fat adaptive. Because once you become fat adaptive, there's the energy.
Yeah.
Right? Carbs, it takes your body a long time to use carbs. That's why, back in the day, you had a pasta party the night before the soccer game.
Yeah.
Right? But if you're fat adaptive, so Keegan Smith is, kind of a friend, coach, mentor, whatever, however you want to explain it. He would talk about this one, his coach would go into a rugby match fasted, 24-hour fast. So now in the athletic world, that's crazy. But if you train the system, you're not going to lose muscle mass in a day if you fast for 24 hours. But if you do it long enough and you're trained in it, I have the best workouts not eating for 18 hours, because you're training the body to go into parasympathetic, so your fight or flight. So as a male, your testosterone is almost quadruple, and so your eyesight, you're ready to go hunt, essentially.
Your senses are alive.
Yeah.
I felt that before. I've fasted before. So I definitely get what you're saying. Yeah.
And it's just a discipline that people need to learn.
Yeah.
As we look at our culture, our society of 80% obesity rate, if people just stop,
Especially in the States, yep.
stop eating and move more, and you can see the kind of the landscape that's happening right now, but the government isn't going to come and save you. So you need to, the light has come on to the food industry that it's ultra processed, and the amount of chemicals that our society ingests is the cause of this issue.
Yeah.
And
I can definitely see that.
Of that information, and looking at fasting as not hardcore or anything like that. I mean, cultures have been doing it since the beginning of time. Animals do it. Animals do it. They fast because their stomach's upset, so they don't eat.
Yeah. Exactly.
Anyway,
yeah. So yeah. Well, thank you for your thoughts on that. Obviously, friends, go ahead and talk to your physician before you start anything. But I think the real important part is that idea that Rich was talking about, that self-discovery. Know your body, right? Really study your body, steward it well. Know what goes in, what comes out. Know where your joints are. Just getting to know who you are. Reintegrate yourself to your body. So as we kind of wrap up, I really want to ask because, I deal with a lot of people with back pain. Do you have any advice, thoughts of somebody that's just dealing with back pain? They can't play pickleball. It's affecting their home life with their friends. They can't do social stuff. They can't, take their wife or spouse out to dinner. It's affecting their home
with
life now.
because of chronic lower back pain.
Chronic lower back pain or acute lower back pain. Do you have anything to that you can add to us about from your knowledge about that, and also any success stories that you want to share from your vast
Sure.
experience?
This I'm going to talk about it in simplistic form.
Okay.
If you feel the symptom is the back of the body, posterior, it's the anterior that's causing the problem. And what I mean by that is if we looked at someone that has back pain and they're sitting, like I'm sitting, right? If I stood up, I put my hands on my hip and I went, oh, my back. Well, your brain is telling you that your back hurts, but your body is giving you the answer, right? If it was true, if it was your back that was the problem, not the symptom, you would touch your toes when you got up, right? So what I would do is I would take a golf ball, I would roll out my shin, I would, take a foam roller or whatever, roll out your quad, learn how to release your sled, roll out your rib cage, elongate the pec, and I would literally work the front side of my fascially, work the front side of my body, because from an anterior posterior perspective, the body will become aligned and will release the tension that's caused by crappy posture. Essentially, that's what it is. And it's from sitting. So if you look at someone that sits all day, they stand up, their muscles in the shins are shortened, their quads are shortened, their hip flexors are shortened, their abdominal wall is shortened, their lats are shortened, the pec is shortened, the SCM is shortened, your scalenes are shortened, technique, right? It's like that what do I want to say? Osteoporosis. Someone that has severe osteoporosis is they're hunched over because of that anterior aspect of the body, the frontal plane. There's lots of variations, lots of reasons, of osteoporosis. I don't mean to talk ill by that, by no means, because it's a horrible disease. But it's just the visual of what can really happen if we don't perfect posture.
Wow. So that pain in the back doesn't really tell the whole story. You're not looking at the whole story.
It's really majority of pain is the symptom. The problem is always somewhere else. Like my example of the broken ankle, right? You broke your right ankle when you're 10 years old. You're in your fees and you just blew your left Achilles. It's just a matter of time.
Okay.
So success story. She was 40 when I've had her for a year, right? She's 41 now. She played for the Ducks. She was a short guard, so she's about 6'1", basketball. So a D1 basketball player. Never got hurt in college. Blew her ACL. She became a professional wakeboarder. Blew her ACL, which is very common in that world. And then rehabbed herself, became a professional mountain bike rider, right? This is kind of, and then got into corporate fitness, corporate world, sitting. So she was this elite level athlete. Every sport that she's ever done, she made it to the elite level.
Wow.
Division I basketball was very impressive. So this is
A1, Division I. Yeah.
Yeah. And so she, but she became that weekend warrior, which is really common. And that weekend
especially in pickleball players.
Exactly. And she started to have back pain. And her back pain was so bad, she went to chiropractors and she did the whole gambit, but she couldn't fix it. She couldn't figure it out. And she came to me, she couldn't lift any weight, blah, blah, blah. We didn't touch weight for a lot of the times when people are this bad, they don't touch weight with me for like external force for 6 months. My most was 9 months. And why that is because posture is so bad that we have to work on the fascial system. You have to create that range, that new ranges of motion, allowing the tendons and ligaments to adapt. Muscle adapts faster than tendons and ligaments. Obviously, we know that.
Yeah, we know that.
And it takes time, right? So as we're working on her, she's starting to move a little bit better, and then now she kites and mountain bikes and weight trains all in the same day. Still works a full-time job. She doesn't have kids, right? But the point is, it doesn't really matter how bad you really are. You can work with the body. You have to learn to mold because it's so malleable, just like the brain. That elasticity that we have in our body, we don't give it enough credit. You know, evolution, like, it depends on who you talk to about how long the human species has been on this planet.
Yeah.
We've evolved so far beyond what we can really fathom. And to watch the body change from this kind of decrepit, crippled style of movement to opening it up, and it's a beautiful thing to watch. And it's very gratifying as a professional, you know, and I think we're just scratching the surface, to be honest with you.
That's awesome.
When it comes to longevity as athletes or weekend warriors, whatever you want to call it. And that whole motion is lotion, and if you stop moving, you die, which I totally believe. You know, movement is everything.
Yeah. As a person who specializes with geriatrics, movement is everything, right?
Yeah.
So many things you said resonated with me, and I hope resonate with you, the audience. Wow, I'm so honored to have Rich on this episode of our podcast.
Thank you, Roberto.
Maybe in the next decade we'll be in Mars. We'll see.
Yeah, right.
Talking about the human evolution. But I guess the last question that I want to ask you and for our audience is, how can people find you? How can people get in touch with you? Let us know.
Sure. So I'm pickleball_Rich, and that's Instagram. AdventureOnwardFitness.com is my website, and I have a 90-day special that I run. And in 90 days, I'll fix your posture, I'll get you out of pain, and I'll get you back on the court.
Awesome. And I'll be sure to put all that stuff in the description of this episode so you guys can get those links. Some of this stuff will be coming out in social media pretty soon. And let's just clap it up for Rich. Thank you for coming on our podcast, A Strong Serve. And again, thank you so much.